What happens when you truly understand the Holy Spirit of God within you is not something dramatic on the surface, yet it is utterly life-altering at the core of your being. It does not arrive with noise or force. It comes quietly, gently, as an inner awakening that changes how you see yourself, how you see others, and how you experience life itself. You begin to realize that God is not a distant power to be reached someday, nor a presence that visits you only in moments of prayer. The Holy Spirit is the very life animating you now, the divine consciousness breathing through every moment of your existence. When this understanding dawns, the constant pressure to fix, control, and manage life begins to loosen its grip. You see that much of your struggle came from believing you were separate, alone, and responsible for making everything work by your own strength. But as the awareness of the Holy Spirit within grows, you discover that you were never meant to live that way. There is an inner guidance already present, a wisdom that knows before you think, that directs before you plan, that sustains before you ask. This realization changes the nature of prayer. Prayer is no longer an attempt to persuade God to act on your behalf. It becomes a sacred listening, a quiet surrender to what is already moving within you. In stillness, you sense answers rising without effort. Decisions begin to feel lighter, clearer, because they are not born from fear or urgency, but from an inner knowing that does not argue or explain itself. You learn to trust this knowing, not because it shouts, but because it carries peace with it. As you understand the Holy Spirit within, fear begins to lose its authority. Fear survives on the belief that you are separate from God, vulnerable to life, and dependent on circumstances. But when divine presence is recognized as your own inner life, fear finds no ground to stand on. You may still face challenges, but they no longer define you or control you. You move through them with a quiet confidence, not because you know the outcome, but because you trust the source guiding you through the process. This inner understanding also transforms how you see others. You no longer see people merely as personalities, problems, or obstacles. You begin to sense the same divine presence expressing itself through them, even when it is hidden beneath confusion or pain. Compassion replaces judgment. Patience replaces frustration. You respond less from reaction and more from awareness, because you are no longer trying to protect a fragile sense of self. You are resting in something far deeper and unshakable. Healing takes on a new meaning as well. It is no longer something you chase or force. Healing unfolds naturally as you align with the Holy Spirit within. As inner resistance softens, the body and mind respond to this harmony. Peace becomes a healing force, not as an idea, but as a living reality felt in your daily life. You begin to see that wholeness was never absent. It was simply unrecognized. Perhaps the most profound change is this: life stops feeling like a burden you must carry and starts feeling like a flow you are allowed to trust. You still act, work, and participate fully in the world, but the weight is gone. You are no longer driven by anxiety about the future or regret about the past. You live from the center, where the Holy Spirit quietly affirms, you are not alone, and you never have been. To truly understand the Holy Spirit of God within you is to awaken from the illusion of separation. It is to realize that divine life is not something you seek, but something you express. And from that understanding, life begins to unfold with a depth, peace, and purpose that no external achievement could ever provide. When you truly understand that the Holy Spirit is not distant, but an indwelling presence, your entire spiritual perspective begins to change from the inside out. For many people, God has been imagined as far away, located in the heavens, accessible only through rituals, special moments, or the intercession of others. This belief quietly reinforces a sense of separation, making life feel like a constant effort to reach something outside oneself. But when awareness dawns that the Holy Spirit lives within you, as the very essence of your being, this sense of distance dissolves and is replaced by an intimate awareness of divine nearness that is always present. This understanding does not come through intellectual reasoning alone. It reveals itself through moments of stillness, when the mind grows quiet enough to sense a deeper reality beneath thoughts and emotions. In those moments, you begin to feel that life itself is conscious, loving, and purposeful within you. The Holy Spirit is no longer an abstract concept, but the inner presence that inspires, comforts, corrects, and guides without force. You realize that every moment of insight, peace, or clarity you have ever experienced was not coming from outside, but from this inner divine source gently expressing itself. As this realization deepens, the way you relate to challenges begins to shift. Instead of immediately reacting with fear or urgency, there is a natural turning inward. You pause, not to escape the problem, but to listen. Within that listening, answers arise that feel calm and grounded rather than rushed. This inner guidance does not always give detailed instructions, yet it provides a sense of direction that feels trustworthy. You learn that you do not have to carry the weight of decision-making alone, because divine intelligence is already operating at the core of your consciousness. Understanding the Holy Spirit as an indwelling presence also changes how you experience prayer and faith. Prayer becomes less about asking for intervention and more about aligning with what is already true within you. Faith is no longer blind belief in something unseen, but a quiet confidence in the presence that has never left you. You begin to trust that even when circumstances appear uncertain, there is a deeper order unfolding through your life. This trust grows not from external proof, but from repeated inner experiences of guidance, peace, and reassurance. Over time, this awareness softens the sense of personal struggle. The constant feeling of being responsible for making everything work begins to fade. You realize that life is not meant to be lived through sheer willpower. The Holy Spirit within you is the source of strength, wisdom, and endurance. And as you rely on this presence, effort gives way to cooperation. You still take action, but your actions feel inspired rather than forced, guided rather than pressured. Perhaps most importantly, recognizing the Holy Spirit within brings a deep sense of belonging and security. You are no longer searching for God in distant places or future moments. You know that divine love is the very foundation of your existence. This awareness brings a quiet joy that does not depend on circumstances, and a peace that remains even when life feels uncertain, because you are anchored in the unchanging presence of God living within you now. When true understanding shifts life from effort to inner listening, a profound transformation takes place in how you move through the world. Most of life's exhaustion does not come from what we do, but from how we do it. Living from effort means relying almost entirely on personal will, mental strain, constant planning, and emotional force to make things happen. It creates the feeling that everything depends on you, that if you stop pushing, life will fall apart. But when awareness turns inward and you begin to listen rather than struggle, you discover that life was never meant to be carried by personal effort alone. Inner listening is not passive or lazy, nor is it a withdrawal from responsibility. It is a shift in the source from which your actions arise. Instead of acting first and then asking God to bless your actions, you begin by becoming still and receptive. In that stillness, something deeper than thought makes itself known. It is not loud or demanding, yet it carries clarity and authority. As you learn to recognize this inner guidance, you notice that the constant mental noise begins to quiet, and with it, much of the anxiety that once accompanied your decisions. This shift from effort to listening changes the quality of your choices. When actions are driven by effort alone, they are often fueled by fear, urgency, or the need to control outcomes. Even when successful, they leave you drained. But actions born from inner listening feel different. They carry a sense of rightness, even when they require courage or patience. You may not always understand the full picture, but there is a calm assurance that you are moving in harmony with something greater than personal reasoning. As this way of living deepens, you begin to notice that solutions arise more naturally. Problems that once seemed overwhelming begin to loosen their grip, not because they vanish instantly, but because your relationship to them changes. You are no longer fighting life. You are cooperating with it. Insights come at unexpected moments, sometimes when you are not actively thinking about the issue at all. This reveals that wisdom does not originate in constant mental effort, but in receptivity to the divine intelligence already present within you. This inner listening also reshapes your sense of timing. Effort-driven living demands immediate results and becomes frustrated when things unfold slowly. Listening teaches patience, not as endurance, but as trust. You begin to sense when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when silence is more powerful. Life feels less rushed, even when you are busy, because you are no longer driven by the fear of missing something or falling behind. Over time, this shift brings a deep sense of relief. The burden of trying to control every outcome falls away. You realize that your role is not to force life into shape, but to remain open and responsive to the guidance within. This does not make life predictable, but it makes it meaningful. You feel supported from the inside, carried by a wisdom that sees further than personal understanding ever could. Living from inner listening restores a natural flow to life. Effort becomes purposeful rather than exhausting. Action becomes inspired rather than reactive, and peace becomes the foundation rather than the reward, because you are no longer striving to make life work, but allowing life to express itself through you. When fear dissolves as divine guidance is recognized within, a deep inner freedom begins to emerge that reshapes how you experience every aspect of life. Fear has always depended on one central belief, the belief that you are alone, separated from God, and responsible for protecting yourself in an unpredictable world. It thrives on uncertainty and feeds on the assumption that danger, lack, or loss is always just around the corner. But the moment you begin to recognize divine guidance as an active presence within you, fear starts to lose its foundation. This recognition does not mean that external circumstances suddenly become perfect or that challenges disappear. Instead, what changes is your inner orientation. You are no longer facing life from a place of isolation. There is an awareness that something greater than personal strength is moving with you and through you. This awareness brings a quiet assurance that you are being led, even when the path ahead is unclear. Fear weakens because it can no longer convince you that you are navigating life blindly. As divine guidance becomes more familiar, you begin to notice that fear often arises from the mind's habit of projecting into the future. It imagines outcomes, rehearses worst-case scenarios, and reacts to situations that have not yet occurred. Inner guidance, however, functions in the present moment. It does not argue with imagined futures. It offers clarity for what is needed now. When you learn to return your attention inward, fear's grip loosens because it cannot survive in the immediacy of divine presence. This inner guidance does not remove responsibility, but it transforms how responsibility is carried. Instead of feeling burdened by the need to anticipate every possible outcome, you trust that you will be shown what to do when the moment arrives. This trust creates a sense of calm alertness rather than anxious vigilance. You become responsive instead of reactive, and this responsiveness is grounded in confidence rather than tension. Over time, the repeated experience of being guided builds an inner stability that fear cannot easily shake. You begin to remember moments when you were uncertain, yet things unfolded in ways you could not have planned. These memories strengthen your trust, not in circumstances, but in the guidance that carried you through them. Fear loses credibility as you see again and again that you are not abandoned to chance. Recognizing divine guidance within also changes how you interpret fear when it does appear. Instead of seeing fear as a signal of danger, you begin to see it as a reminder to turn inward. Fear becomes a doorway rather than an obstacle. It alerts you to areas where you have temporarily forgotten your connection to divine presence. In turning back to that presence, fear naturally subsides without force or suppression. This inner freedom extends into relationships, work, and personal decisions. You are less driven by the need for approval, security, or control. You speak more honestly, act more authentically, and make choices that align with inner peace rather than external pressure. Even when outcomes are uncertain, there is a steady sense that you are being upheld from within. As divine guidance becomes your reference point, fear gradually loses its power to define your life. You are no longer motivated by avoidance or self-protection. You move forward with a quiet courage that does not come from confidence in yourself, but from trust in the presence guiding you. And in that trust, fear fades into the background, no longer directing your thoughts, decisions, or sense of self. When healing and peace arise naturally from spiritual awareness, they no longer feel like distant goals that must be pursued or earned. Instead, they are revealed as natural states that emerge when consciousness aligns with divine truth. Much of human suffering is rooted not in the body or circumstances themselves, but in the belief of separation from God. This belief creates tension in the mind, resistance in the emotions, and eventually imbalance in the body. As spiritual awareness deepens, this false sense of separation begins to dissolve, and with it, the inner conflict that fuels unrest and dis-ease. Spiritual awareness is not an escape from reality, but a clearer perception of it. It allows you to see life through the lens of divine presence rather than personal struggle. When you recognize that the Holy Spirit is actively expressing itself as your true life, the mind begins to rest. This resting is not inactivity but a release of inner resistance. The body responds to this release because it is deeply influenced by the state of consciousness that governs it. As fear, guilt, and anxiety lose their hold, the natural balance of being is restored. Healing in this awareness is not something imposed upon the body from the outside. It unfolds from within as harmony replaces inner conflict. When the mind is no longer divided between trust and fear, hope and doubt, the body reflects this unity. This does not mean that every physical condition changes instantly, but it does mean that the atmosphere in which healing occurs is established. Peace becomes the soil in which restoration takes place, and this peace is not dependent on external evidence. As spiritual awareness grows, you begin to notice subtle but profound shifts in how you experience discomfort or illness. Instead of reacting with panic or frustration, there is a gentle turning inward. In that inward turning, you reconnect with the presence that is whole, complete, and untouched by condition or diagnosis. This connection does not deny the body's experience, but it places it within a larger truth. The body is no longer seen as a separate entity struggling on its own, but as an expression of divine life responding to consciousness. Peace, in this context, is not merely emotional calm. It is a deep inner stillness that remains even when circumstances are imperfect. This peace arises because you are no longer measuring your well-being by external conditions alone. You are anchored in an awareness of God as the source of life, intelligence, and order within you. From this anchoring, anxiety gradually loses its momentum. The mind no longer races to control outcomes or interpret every sensation as a threat. This inner peace has a transformative effect on daily living. You become less reactive, more patient, and more compassionate toward yourself and others. Stressful situations that once triggered tension now meet a calmer response. This calm is not forced. It flows naturally from a consciousness that trusts the unfolding of life. Over time, this way of being reshapes habits, relationships, and even physical rhythms, because peace influences every level of experience. Healing and peace continue to unfold as long as spiritual awareness is nurtured. They are not rewards for perfect faith, but expressions of alignment with divine reality. As you remain attentive to the presence within, life gradually organizes itself around harmony rather than conflict. In this state, healing is not a struggle to fix what is broken, but a gentle return to the wholeness that has always been present at the core of your being. When the ego's control weakens as inner truth takes the lead, life begins to unfold with a sense of ease that once felt impossible. The ego thrives on the belief that it must manage, defend, and define everything in order to survive. It is built from past experiences, learned identities, fears, and desires, and it constantly seeks reassurance through control. When this ego-driven mindset governs life, there is a persistent tension beneath the surface, a feeling that something must always be guarded or proven. But as inner truth becomes the guiding force, this tension gradually loosens. Inner truth does not argue with the ego or try to destroy it. Instead, it quietly reveals a deeper reality that makes ego control unnecessary. As you become more aware of the divine presence within, you begin to sense that your true identity is not confined to roles, achievements, or opinions. This realization weakens the ego's authority because the ego depends on identification with form. When you no longer believe you are only the image you project or the story you tell about yourself, the ego loses its grip naturally. This shift is often subtle. You may notice that you react less strongly to criticism or praise. Situations that once triggered defensiveness begin to pass without the same emotional charge. This is not indifference, but freedom. You are no longer driven by the need to protect a fragile self-image. Inner truth provides a sense of security that does not depend on external validation. From this place, you can listen more openly, admit mistakes more easily, and respond with authenticity rather than impulse. As the ego's control weakens, decision-making changes as well. Instead of asking what will make you look successful or keep you safe, you begin to ask what aligns with inner peace. Choices become less about fear of loss and more about faith in guidance. This does not mean you stop thinking or planning, but that thought becomes a tool rather than a master. You are no longer compelled to act from urgency or comparison. There is a growing trust that what is meant to unfold will do so without manipulation. Relationships are deeply affected by this transformation. Ego seeks control through judgment, expectation, and the need to be right. Inner truth fosters understanding, patience, and humility. You become less interested in winning arguments and more interested in maintaining harmony. You can allow others to be who they are without feeling threatened. This creates space for genuine connection because interactions are no longer driven by hidden agendas or unmet needs. The weakening of ego control also brings relief from constant mental strain. Much of the mind's exhaustion comes from maintaining false identities and defending imagined threats. When inner truth leads, the mind relaxes. Thoughts slow down. Silence becomes comfortable rather than uncomfortable. In this quiet, creativity and insight emerge naturally. You begin to act from inspiration instead of compulsion, from clarity instead of confusion. This process does not eliminate challenges, but it changes how challenges are met. Without ego dominating the response, difficulties are approached with openness rather than resistance. You are willing to learn, adapt, and grow. Failure loses its sting because it no longer threatens your worth. Success loses its grip because it no longer defines you. As inner truth continues to guide your life, the ego takes its proper place as a functional tool rather than a ruling force. Control gives way to trust, struggle gives way to flow, and life begins to express itself with greater authenticity and peace because you are no longer trying to become someone, but allowing your true nature to be revealed through every experience. When life becomes an expression of divine flow rather than personal struggle, existence is no longer experienced as a constant battle that must be fought and won. Personal struggle is rooted in the belief that you are a separate individual pushing against circumstances, time, and other people in order to survive or succeed. This belief creates resistance, and resistance gives rise to tension, exhaustion, and disappointment. But as awareness shifts toward the divine presence moving within you, life begins to feel less like something you are forcing and more like something that is unfolding through you. This change does not mean that effort disappears, but effort takes on a different quality. Instead of striving from anxiety or fear, action arises from inner alignment. You are no longer driven by the need to control outcomes, because you trust the intelligence guiding the process. This trust allows you to participate fully in life without being crushed by it. You still plan, work, and respond to challenges, but there is an underlying sense of ease, as if you are moving with a current rather than against it. Divine flow is experienced when you are attuned to inner guidance and willing to follow it, even when it contradicts personal expectations. At times, this may require patience, surrender, or the courage to let go of familiar patterns. The personal mind often resists this because it is accustomed to measuring progress through effort and struggle. Yet as you observe how life responds when you act from inner clarity, confidence in the flow grows. You begin to see that forcing outcomes often delays or distorts what could have unfolded naturally. As life becomes more flow-oriented, timing reveals itself as precise rather than random. Opportunities arise at moments you could not have orchestrated, and obstacles dissolve in ways you could not have predicted. This does not imply a life without challenges, but challenges no longer feel hostile. They are seen as movements within the same divine flow, shaping growth rather than opposing it. You meet them with openness instead of resistance, which allows solutions to emerge more easily. This way of living brings a deep sense of trust in life itself. You no longer feel the need to constantly ask whether you are on the right path because peace becomes the indicator. When actions align with divine flow, there is an inner confirmation that does not depend on external results. Even in uncertainty, there is stability. Even in change, there is continuity. This stability comes from knowing that the source of life is not external circumstances, but the divine presence expressing itself as your own being. Personal struggle often centers on identity, on trying to become someone or maintain a certain image. Divine flow dissolves this struggle by revealing that you are already complete in essence. Life is no longer about proving worth or securing identity. It becomes a process of allowing what is true within to express itself naturally. This expression is unique to you, yet it is guided by a universal intelligence that harmonizes all things. As this understanding deepens, gratitude arises effortlessly. You begin to appreciate moments as they are, rather than as stepping stones to something else. Ordinary experiences take on meaning because they are recognized as part of a larger unfolding. You are less preoccupied with the future and less burdened by the past, because attention rests in the living present where divine flow is always active. Living as an expression of divine flow is not an escape from the world, but a deeper participation in it. Struggle gives way to cooperation, fear gives way to trust, and effort gives way to alignment, because life is no longer something you are trying to manage, but something you are allowing to move through you with purpose and grace. When all of these truths are brought together, a single realization begins to shine through the entire message. Life is not meant to be lived from separation, effort, fear, or control, but from an awakened awareness of the divine presence within. Understanding the Holy Spirit of God as an indwelling reality changes the very foundation upon which life is built. What once felt heavy becomes lighter, what once felt confusing becomes clearer, and what once felt threatening loses its power. You begin to see that the struggle was never imposed by life itself, but by a misunderstanding of who you truly are. As inner listening replaces constant striving, life shifts from pressure to purpose. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to force outcomes or anticipate every possibility. Instead, you learn to pause, to listen, and to trust the quiet guidance that has always been present. This trust does not make life passive, it makes it intelligent. Action flows from clarity rather than fear, and effort becomes a form of cooperation with divine wisdom rather than a battle against circumstances. In this way, life becomes simpler, not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer carrying them alone. With the recognition of divine guidance within, fear begins to fade from its position of authority. It may still appear, but it no longer rules your decisions or defines your identity. You come to understand that fear is rooted in the illusion of separation, and as that illusion dissolves, courage arises naturally. This courage is not based on confidence in personal strength, but on trust in the presence that leads, sustains, and restores. From this trust, a deep inner stability emerges that remains steady even in uncertainty. Healing and peace then reveal themselves as natural expressions of spiritual awareness, not rewards for perfection or effort. As inner conflict gives way to inner harmony, the mind rests, the body responds, and life reorganizes itself around balance. Peace becomes the foundation of living rather than a distant goal, influencing how you think, act, and relate to others. From this peace, compassion deepens, patience expands, and life begins to reflect the harmony being cultivated within. As inner truth takes the lead, the ego's grip loosens without struggle. You no longer need to defend an image, prove your worth, or control every outcome. Identity shifts from what you do or achieve to what you are in essence. This brings freedom in relationships, humility in success, resilience in failure, and authenticity in every expression of life. Control gives way to trust, and effort gives way to alignment. Ultimately, life is revealed not as a personal struggle to survive or succeed, but as a divine flow expressing itself through you. You are no longer pushing against life, you are moving with it. In this awareness, ordinary moments carry sacred meaning, and each step feels guided rather than forced. To understand the Holy Spirit within is to awaken to this truth, that you were never meant to struggle your way to God, but to live from the divine life that has always been quietly living as you,